In this video, I want to show you how I use these little Inktense Derwent Pastels to create backgrounds for little mini series of landscape studies. Just in a shop in my local town of Bury St Edmunds, it was an art shop, obviously, I came across a section with these little Derwent Inktense Pastels, and what I found interesting about them was that in a description of how these pastels work is they are water soluble, so you can draw with them, and then you can use a wet brush and make them water soluble, but they dry permanent like acrylics. So I thought, this is a really interesting way of using a painterly background for printmaking. And I know I've made videos about this before, but the downside of using acrylics, inks as well as paints, is that it gives a coating to the surface, to the lovely texture of your watercolor paper, which will make the paper, the texture sort of less absorbent to the ink whilst printmaking. So the idea of pastels was very appealing to me. So I bought three primary colors just to start with. I will buy some more now that I know that it works. And the biggest sort of point in the experiment was, once I've covered the surface of the paper with this pastel, was to see if the color was going to run in water when I wetted the paper before printmaking. And it turned out that it didn't. So I will definitely use these again, because I was able to achieve a really beautiful background. I was, even though I was restricted to just three primary colors, I was able to soften them and mix them together, and you will see how I ended up mixing them as well. Yeah, really cool little pastels. Hope you will enjoy the video, and thank you for watching. So I'm starting off with a lovely paper. It's a Caddy 300 GSM paper. It has a really nice texture, and the reason why I'm choosing this paper is because I want to have a really good deal of texture. So I've got these deckled edge rulers that I'm going to use, because I'm going to make these studies really small. So I need to cut this, and I need to have a lovely edge that is on the other edges. And these deckled edge rulers are a really, really good way of achieving this rough edge on paper like a Caddy paper that already has it with it. So bending the paper actually really helps in already sort of marking the area for ripping, and it's a lot easier to rip. So I've got my Inktense Derwent Pastels here, ready for action. And I'm going to use a series of landscape studies I did a while ago, just to think of some sort of compositional ideas here. It's not going to be sort of purely abstract. It's going to be based on some of the work I have done before. And here are some Collagraph plates made on, I think it was on the packaging from a hairdryer. As you can see, I used this. It's really difficult to see because they're on black. I do apologize. They have been made in another video, and here's a link to this video. You can check out how I made these Collagraph plates. So they just basically cutouts, and I've used various gels and pastes to create shiny and dull areas. So with the sort of inspiration and ideas from these little mini landscape studies, I'm kind of looking at some of these shapes. I didn't want to make separate shapes for this experiment. I just used whatever I could find in my box of Collagraph plates, and I'm sort of thinking about the composition and how I'm going to place these plates on prepared paper. Okay, so enough talking. Let's get to it. So I'm just trying out the blue pastel, and never used this before, so it's a bit of an unknown territory. I'm just getting some, I guess, ink onto the pastel, the ink pastel onto the paper. It's creating a nice texture because the paper is heavily textured. And look at that, it's really rather lovely. It looks a bit like a watercolor but behaves like an acrylic. I love it. It seems to be absorbed really well into the paper, which is a good sign. Let's just hope it's permanent enough for when I soak it. And look at that, if you have a wet paper already, it leaves some really gorgeous marks, very painterly. Really like that. And obviously, once you mix the two colors together, that will create some very interesting results. So that was, having it been my first drawing, my first background, it's probably a little bit muddy, that one, as I didn't really know what I was doing. Still, I'm going to use it, not going to waste it. It looks a little bit mixed up, but it's fine. So, very positive feeling about it so far. I'm going to leave that one now and move on to the next one. It didn't take long to dry, I have to say, which was another good point. I actually soaked it in a bath. I think it was on the same day. It might help if you do it the next day, not to get any residue ink coming off the paper. It will probably be unavoidable. You will get some, but it probably, the longer you leave it to dry, the better. The more permanent it will be. So it's, as you can see, it's really easy to blend different colors. The colors I have a little bit garish because they're primary colors. But it's possible to get all sorts of different other colors. You don't have to get primary colors, of course. A more muted range might be more agreeable for your artwork. Anyway, as they dry, they do become a little bit duller, of course. And also, once you print them, the residue will come off a little bit. So they will become slightly duller, the colors. They still very vibrant anyway, so it's not a problem. Here I'm just using a plastic chopping board which has got rough surface. This is a really good way of mixing the two different colors to create, let's say, green. I use this chopping board, especially using my studio, for doing that. Really handy little hack. So I'm kind of getting more into it after having done two. So I'm just sort of getting more into swing of using these Inktense pastels. Do really love textures you can get against the rough surface of the paper, but also if you use the pastel on already wet paper, that's really interesting as well. You get a very intense color, so you have a choice and control over how the intensity of the color, the saturation you will have on your artwork as well. And of course, really lovely brush marks as well, and textures. So really nice movement can be achieved. And here is my last one. Of course, I didn't, in this case, only in the last one. You can obviously draw as well with it and have some mark making going on as well for your print, which is really nice. So in this one, I kind of blended in the lines, but also ended up having the lines showing a little bit in my final print. So that's another idea for using for this technique. And now they are dry, it's time to put them in my water bath. And after soaking them for a significant amount of time, I think it was half an hour, you can see the colours are not running at all. So it is permanent. Good news. Now that I've got my papers ready, it's time to ink up my Collagraph plates. So I've got some Aqua black ink in this jar because when I originally got the Aqua black ink, it was very stiff. So I needed to mix it with blending medium, and as a result, I've got it in a jar. But it is an Aqua ink, indeed, and I will be using it for this experiment. It is always a really good idea to give your ink a good stir for consistency of the thickness of the ink. And because these plates don't have a huge amount of texture, I will just roll them out onto the plate, roll the ink out onto the plate. So I'm just rolling it out on a plastic sheet first, and once I've got my roller nicely covered, I just roll the ink out onto these little plates. Once they were all covered with ink, I'm using a scrim. Here my scrim is a little bit stiff. Some people wash the scrims. I just tend to sort of scrunch them up to loosen them up. And I'm just using scrim to wipe off excess ink. In this case, the ink is pretty loose. There's not a huge amount of it, so scrim should be enough. Sometimes if there's a lot of ink on the plate, it's good to get rid of the excess with some newsprint first before you use the scrim. I also often polish the plates, but in this case, I didn't feel there was any need. So just using the scrim was enough. After taking the paper out of the bath and cleaning it with a kitchen towel, I discovered that actually some ink is coming off. So it's better actually to blot it. So that was a good lesson learned. So I'm just preparing a press here. But as you can see, the intensity of the ink is pretty good still, even though some ink came off onto the kitchen towel. But like I say, you can resolve that a lot better blotting it rather than wiping it with a kitchen towel, which I did a little bit too hard. So here I'm trying to decide what composition I'm going to go for, sort of sticking with some of the ideas from the landscape studies, and I decided to go for a vertical composition here. Right, so the reason normally I print by putting a paper on top of the Collagraph, but here, because I'm trying to create composition at the same time, I'm doing it in reverse. A couple of newsprint sheets on top. I've also placed some card, blankets go down, and it's going through the press. I just adjusted the press and putting it through the press now. I've done it twice just for good measure, and just peeling off the newsprint, you can see some of the ink has come off, which is absolutely fine, no problem. And just it's a little bit more tricky if the Collagraph is on top of the print, just to take it off, but it's not a problem really. And yeah, really lovely. That sort of color coming through, it's beautiful. I really, really love printing on textured areas, on textured paper. This paper I have blotted instead of white. You should always blot it anyway. I go into a terrible habit, I know. Just, oh, this could be quite cool. I really like this plate. That is giving me some really lovely landscape texture. Okay, newsprint on top like before, and a bit of card too. Blankets down, and of course the press is going. Okay, so here we go. This one got a little bit sticky. I have a feeling my paper might have been a little bit too wet. Also, I've been using these industrial wipes for builders, and I have a feeling they make my Collagraph plates a little bit sticky. So I need to be careful about that. One way to avoid the stickiness of plate is to wipe them with some refined linseed oil first. That really helps, I find. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It peeled off quite nicely in the end, and I think it looks gorgeous. I really love it. This one is one of my faves, I think. Some gorgeous textures there and colours. Really like this. Okay, time for penultimate print. And here I am going for something a little bit similar. This has got really lovely, very defined patterns, so that will be quite interesting. I love patterns in nature. You often see really beautiful patterns, and that's why I really like these plates in this experiment, because you often find really interesting patterns in nature. So again, through the press, here we go. Here comes the moment of reveal. Hope this one didn't stick like the last one. Not a huge problem, but I really love the pattern on this one. Reminds me of some of the shadows you get sometimes from trees or ploughed fields. Yeah, really happy with this. Beautiful. So the last one, this was my least favourite one because I felt it was a little bit muddy, but actually as it dried, the colours don't look too bad. I couldn't decide for ages where to put my plate, as you can see, but finally managed to make up my mind. And you didn't see me inking this plate up because I just sneakily inked it up off camera. I decided I needed something else on this plate. Not enough was going on for me. So I just inked up another little plate that I had in my box. And as always, of course, putting it through the press, it's the same procedure, which I speed up not to bore you. Right, so here we go. This one didn't turn out as bad as I thought. I thought I was going to bin it, but it looked quite cool actually. The colours were a bit more subdued, not as garish, so a little bit different than the others. But it was actually okay. The colours blended in fine in the end, and it didn't look too muddy. But it really lovely contrast between the two different plates. One is a lot darker. Yeah, so cool. That's it. So I do really hope you enjoyed this video. It's really nice to find new materials. It can revive interest and spark some experimental fun stuff. So I hope I've sparked that in you, and thank you so much for watching.